IVIG isn't magic, but for many people, it's close. Maybe your doctor just dropped IVIG into the conversation, or maybe you've been getting infusions for years, but how well do you really know what's in the bag? Here's 6 facts about IVIG that will catch you off guard, even if you think you've heard them all. When I initially speak to someone during a welcome call, the first question I'll ask is, did your doctor explain what IVIG is and how it helps? 9 out of 10 times, the answer is one of 2 things. Either no, not at all, or yeah, maybe a little bit, but not enough to be super comfortable with yet. Could you explain it to me again? When most people hear IVIG, they probably assume it's some lab-engineered drug whipped up by the same scientists in white coats making aspirin and overpriced skincare. But IVIG is nothing like that. It is actually a human plasma-derived therapy, meaning it comes straight from human donors. A lot of them. Each batch of IVIG contains antibodies pooled from about 3,000 to 10,000 carefully screened donors. Why so many? Because your immune system isn't a one-size-fits-all operation. The goal is to gather a wide variety of antibodies to help regulate or support your immune function across many different conditions. So, no, it's not synthetic, and it is definitely not magic. It's the result of science, research, and thousands of generous people rolling up their sleeves. Literally.
Voluntarily.
All right, so here's the thing. Yes, IVIG comes from human plasma, but when I say this, most people picture a bag of blood as if it was just donated. The truth is, what's in the IVIG bottle is a far departure from whole blood or even the plasma that it started out as, which is this golden straw-colored liquid that makes up to 55% of your total blood volume and carries nutrients, hormones, and antibodies. So even if we wanted to, we can't synthesize IVIG in a lab because Mother Nature still holds the patent on human blood.
Oh, okay.
There are 5 different types of immunoglobulins in your body, but IgG is the MVP. Let's talk about the cast of characters in your immune system, mainly the 5 immunoglobulins that run the show. Think of these as your body's specialized defense squad, each with its own job title and personality quirks. They're all antibodies, but they are not all created equally. First up, we've got IgG, the star of the show and the main antibody you receive during IVIG therapy. IgG is the most abundant antibody in your bloodstream, and it was also your first immunity gift from your mom. Before you even took your first breath, you were already borrowing her immunity courtesy of IgG. So, essentially getting a preloaded immune system armed with antibodies that recognized pathogens that your mom had already encountered. And this is all because during the first few months of life, your immune system is still figuring out how to adult. But you're protected by mom's frontline defenders while things are getting up to speed. But like any good rental, there's also a time limit. These maternal IgG antibodies start to wane after a few months, which is why babies eventually need their own immune system to step up, and why vaccinations are timed the way they are, to catch that window when mom's protection is fading out, but before exposure risks increase. Immunoglobulin G is the workhorse of your immune system. It's your long-term strategist, quietly keeping tabs, remembering past infections, and neutralizing threats before you even know they've landed. If your immune system had a LinkedIn profile, IgG would list experienced in handling viruses, bacteria, and toxin management with a focus on immune regulation. This is why it's the chosen one for infusion. It's stable, versatile, and knows how to keep things under control without overreacting. But then there's IgA. Hanging out in your mucous membranes, your nose, throat, lungs, and gut. IgA is like a bouncer at a club. standing at all of the entrances, making sure pathogens don't get past the velvet rope. It's essential for guarding those frontline surfaces, but it doesn't really circulate in the bloodstream the way IgG does. Most IVIG products will contain trace amounts of IgA, kind of like glitter after a craft project. Even if you're super careful, you'll still find it days later randomly stuck to your cheek. It's not intentional, it's just nearly impossible to remove every last bit of IgA during the purification process. And for most people, this isn't a big deal, but for patients with IgA deficiency, especially those who've developed anti-IgA antibodies, these tiny amounts can trigger giant problems. The biggest concern is a potential for an allergic reaction, which ranges from mild to, in rare cases, anaphylaxis during an infusion. And this is why clinicians are so cautious with IgA deficient patients, often opting for low IgA formulations when available, and pre-medicating and closely monitoring infusions to avoid any unwanted drama. Next, meet IgM. He's the first responder of this fantastic five, and it's the first antibody to show up when there's a new infection. IgM kicks down the door and starts attacking before anyone even knows what's going on. But it's more of a short-term emergency guy, not the type you really rely on for long-term immune support, which is why it's not bottled up for IVIG. Next is IgE, and this one's a bit dramatic because its only responsibility is to induce allergic reactions. The kind where a single peanut can clear a room faster than a fire alarm. And for 30% of the global population, it turns springtime into Mother Nature's personal blooming hellscape. IgE's job is to overreact to things that might be dangerous, but usually aren't. So safe to say, we're not infusing this one unless you believe every infusion should come with a plot twist and a 911 call. And finally, IgD, the mysterious one. Even immunologists are still side-eyeing IgD, like, what exactly do you do all day? It's involved in starting immune responses, but honestly, it's still a bit of an enigma. It's definitely not IVIG material. IVIG has been saving lives since 1952. Another common misconception is that IVIG is experimental, and it is not. It's actually been around for over 70 years.
That's groovy.
In 1952, Dr. Ogden Brutton had a young patient, a boy, with constant life-threatening infections that no matter what antibiotics he threw at them, they kept coming back. The kid wasn't just sickly, he had no measurable gamma globulin or IgG in his blood. Today, we know this condition as X-linked agammaglobulinemia, or XLA. It's also known as Brutton's agammaglobulinemia, or Brutton's disease, in honor of Dr. Brutton. And at the time, it was groundbreaking just to figure out that this boy's immune system was missing a key component: antibodies. The what if moment. Brutton realized that if the child's body could make antibodies, then maybe he could replace them. And this was radical thinking in an era where immune deficiencies weren't well understood. So he decided to inject the boy with gamma globulin. And this wasn't like the IVIG that we have today. It was given as multiple and frequent subcutaneous injections, which are just under the skin. And as the therapy evolved, it was changed to multiple intramuscular injections. But both of these methods were extremely painful because the solution was really thick and viscous and not as purified in comparison to today's standards. And it absorbed slowly, causing significant discomfort, swelling, and localized pain. The outcome: it worked. This patient's infections dropped dramatically because his body finally had some defense system in place. And this was the first documented use of antibody replacement therapy. And it opened the door to what would eventually become the IVIG that we all know today. And a side note, the IV in IVIG just stands for intravenous, which designates the route of administration. Brutton's method was basic by today's standards, but it proved a critical concept. If the body can't make antibodies, we can give them. And that simple idea changed immunology forever. And then by 1981, IVIG wasn't just a treatment for people lacking an immune system anymore. It became a tool for controlling an overactive one. Fast forward to 2025, IVIG is FDA approved for over a dozen conditions and prescribed off-label for many more, including neurological disorders, certain fertility issues, and complex cases of autoimmune dysfunction. One patient's annual supply of IVIG requires about 250 liters of plasma. Now, if you were paying attention earlier, you might recall I said each batch of IVIG contains antibodies pooled from 3,000 to 10,000 carefully screened donors. But here I'm saying something different. So which is it?
I'm asking hypothetically for a friend.
Well, both statements are technically correct, but they refer to different scales within the IVIG production process. And to make this easier to visualize, I'm going to use the soup pot analogy. So, picture it. We're at the Guinness Book of World Records, and our goal is to win the title for the world's biggest pot of chicken soup. And before you stands a pot the size of a swimming pool. And in it, we're gonna build our base stock that will give our soup that really rich and perfectly seasoned flavor at the end. Now, you didn't come to mess around here. This is your dream after all, and you knew this was going to be a huge undertaking. So you invited 3,000 to 10,000 chef friends to join your team, aka plasma donors. And this is to help make the best soup base imaginable by having each of them add their super secret signature ingredient, plasma, to the pot. I mean, you are not taking any chances here. So after cooking it for a while, it's time to strain and purify this mixture to make the perfect soup. But how to remove the parts you don't need anymore without weakening the flavor? Fractionation. This is what will ensure consistency and that a broad spectrum of seasoning, antibodies, remains in the end product in uniform amounts. So by the end, you've got this huge, well-mixed, immune-boosting super soup.
Honey!
What?
Where's my super soup?
What?
Where is my super soup?
All that's left to do is serve it to the judges. So you ladle out smaller portions in batches, which contains, through your calculations, seasonings from 1,000 to 1,500 of your chef friends per batch. And relating this back to IVIG, each of these batches has been through purification and safety checks. It gets bottled, labeled, and finally infused into recipients. That's why plasma donation isn't just helpful, it's critical. Without those thousands of donors, this therapy does not exist. And it also highlights why IVIG is so expensive and why plasma donation campaigns are so critical. If you're able to donate, do it. It's one of the few things that directly saves lives, and plasma demand has skyrocketed in 2025. Global demand for IVIG has increased by over 30% since 2022. Why? Well, we have broader indications for it, aging populations with more chronic conditions, increased diagnoses of previously overlooked autoimmune disorders, and all of this surge has led to periodic shortages, especially in rural areas. And this is really exciting. There's also more investment in lab-created immunoglobulin research, though we're still years away from that being mainstream, unfortunately. But yeah, all of this has led to a lot more research and hopefully better supply chain. Does IVIG protect against COVID? So this is a question I still get asked all the time. So let's clear it up once and for all. If your IVIG was produced from plasma collected before 2020, the answer is simple: no. There are no COVID-19 antibodies in that IVIG. SARS-CoV-2 did not exist in the human population yet, so donors obviously hadn't developed any antibodies against it. Now, fast forward to post-2020, with millions of people exposed to COVID, either through infection or vaccination, you would expect plasma donations collected after that point to contain some level of COVID antibodies, and you'd be correct. So technically, yes, some batches of IVIG produced after the pandemic hit may contain low levels of antibodies against COVID-19. But here's where things get really important. IVIG isn't designed, purified, or concentrated to fight any specific viruses, including COVID. It's boosting general immune memory from everyday exposures, things like the flu, common colds, and other common pathogens. But the amount of COVID-specific antibodies in IG is inconsistent because it depends on the donor pool and timing. It's not concentrated enough to act like a treatment or a preventative. And more importantly, it's not clinically proven to offer any reliable protection against COVID infection. Now, if you're immune compromised, you might be thinking, well, any extra antibodies are helpful, right? Well, in theory, sure, it doesn't hurt, but IVIG isn't a COVID-specific therapy like monoclonal antibodies were or what vaccines are designated to do. So your next logical question is probably, well, based on this, is it possible to be infused with IVIG that was manufactured pre-2020? Practically speaking, close to zero. And here's why. Most IVIG products have a shelf life of about 24 to 36 months or 2 to 3 years, depending on the manufacturer and the storage conditions. Some might be labeled up to 4 years, but that's more the exception than the rule. And by 2025, we are well beyond even that window. IVIG is not sitting around collecting dust. It is in constant demand worldwide. Because of this, manufacturers produce and distribute IVIG continuously to pharmacies, hospitals, and infusion centers who rotate their stock quickly, and older inventory is used first. It's a first in, first out system. Also, no pharmacy or infusion center is going to risk using expired or even near expired IVIG. So by 2025, anything manufactured pre-2020 would either be long gone or discarded due to expiration. What about other viral transmissions? Can you get HIV, hepatitis B or C, or other viruses from IVIG? The short answer, it's extremely unlikely. We're talking odds so low that they're almost theoretical at this point. Modern IVIG goes through multiple layers of safety protocols, including donor screening, viral inactivation, and advanced filtration techniques. Because of this, there hasn't been a documented case of HIV transmission through IVIG in decades.
Pause.
In decades? Meaning it has happened? Yes, this did happen at one time, but when did it happen? There were documented cases in the early to mid-1980s during the very beginning of the HIV/AIDS crisis, before blood products like IVIG and factor concentrates, which are used for hemophilia, were properly screened or treated for viruses. At that time, HIV hadn't even been identified yet. This didn't happen until 1983 or 1984, so there were no testing protocols in place. Plasma products, including IVIG, weren't yet subjected to the viral inactivation processes that we now consider standard. There were a few isolated cases of HIV transmission through plasma-derived products like IVIG that were reported globally in the early 1980s. These were tragic, but they were also a wake-up call that led to sweeping changes in how plasma is collected, screened, and processed. By 1987, Manufacturers had implemented rigorous donor screening, mandatory HIV testing, and advanced viral inactivation techniques like heat treatment, solvent and detergent processing, and later nanofiltration. And as a result, there have been no documented cases of HIV transmission via IVIG since those early safety measures were put into place. So, we're talking nearly 40 years of a spotless track record when it comes to HIV transmission. Now, I did have a patient who tested positive for hepatitis C after one round of IVIG. While it's natural to connect the two events, it's also important to remember that timing doesn't equal cause. And Hep C can sit dormant or undetected for years before showing up on labs, especially if previous screenings weren't routine. False positives also happen. IVIG contains pooled antibodies, and in rare cases, passive transfer of antibodies can trigger a false positive on certain tests. This is more common with hepatitis A and B serologies, but it's possible with Hep C antibody tests too. The safety net currently in place is designed to catch contamination long before it ever gets infused into a patient. Knowing what IVIG actually is puts you ahead of most, but the real challenge is navigating everything that comes with it. If you're wondering about side effects or the real cost of therapy, or what's different about IVIG in 2025, I break all of that down in my latest video because understanding the therapy is one thing, but managing it in the real world, that's a whole different conversation. If you need more personalized help, head over to lucidmedhub.com where you can book a one-on-one call with me now. You can ask questions and make sense of all of the chaos. So I'll see you over there. It is so windy. Again, I feel like it's the coming of the four horsemen here. I feel like my house is going to lift off the foundation, right? I do. Coco. I know. No, I'm not going to rub your belly right now.